are there new models that are reconciling spirituality and technology?
Yeah, I think that would be part of it. In the book, I also talk about sexuality and relationships being a really interesting area, that we've been sort of trapped in this monogamous framework that is part of our Christian conditioning and Victorian conditioning, and the kind of negative, repressive ambiance around sexuality as something that we might have to take to a much higher level of conscious articulation, and actually that what's happening in relationships is maybe part of the key to moving into a shift in consciousness.
How would not being monogamous still support the family? Does that work?
Right. Well, it's just that we've constructed this family unit as this monogamous unit. If you go to Aboriginal cultures, they have different ways of constructing sexuality and family and so on. So it's like out of a multitude of possibilities, we took this one that was very convenient for our economic system and our industrial system, and we instituted that as the only model. And I think that people are chafing against that, and there's a lot of frustration and sort of then becomes sort of sublimated aggression around those patterns. Like if you read the Kinsey report, from the 50s, Kinsey recognized, he did all this research on human sexuality, and what he came up with is that sexuality was this kind of infinite variety, sort of a full spectrum, and that nobody corresponded to, was exactly the same as anybody else. So, but when we've constructed this kind of paradigm where, monogamy is sort of good, and also it's what we give institutional support to, it doesn't allow for people to explore what their own natures could be. And when people can't explore what their own natures can be, that creates frustration and antagonism, So it just seems to be an area where there's a lot of trapped and blocked energy and a lot of shadow material, and it's something that people still have a lot of work to do. It's not necessarily about monogamy versus polyamory. It's really about what is the truth of your own nature. And if you can't express that truth, then you can't really be happy. And if you can't really be happy, you're going to be frustrated and aggressive, and then that's going to create negative ramifications.
So it's about growth.
Yeah.
Wow. Freedom to grow. Yeah. That was well put. Thank you.
The more coffee I drink, the more articulate I get.
Oh, we'll get you a pie. That was great. That's great. I'm sorry.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm interested in anything new that's happened since you finished the book, because I always experience that how, as an artist or kind of a person who's on a quest for truth, as soon as you finish one thing, it's like that's history.
Right.
And then there's a whole new quest that's probably opened up for you. And so who are you attracting? What new ideas? And where do you go from here? What areas are you interested in exploring?
Totally. Yeah, well, this book was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and it was like this 5-year process where I basically had to go through what seemed to be 3 or 4 dark nights of the soul, and kind of going through this kind of apocalyptic material, also separating from my partner as I began to go through all this stuff about relationships and sexuality and internalize that. So in a way, I've been in a little bit of a pause. I've been on a little bit of a vacation for the last few months and not really reading. If I was to write another book, soon, it would probably be about sexuality and spirituality and consciousness, because I think that's, as I said, this area that I only got to at the end of the book. Just like in the first book, I only got to this idea of prophecy, towards the end of Breaking Open the Head. So that opened up as what would be the next subject. So that's one thing. And then also having more and more kind of a precipitory intuition about what this shift into this next form of consciousness would be. And that, and some of it I'm trying to help materialize through Evolver, because in the kind of postmodern individual context that we've been stuck in, there are a lot of things that are very difficult to do. It's very difficult to establish relationships based on trust, and it's very difficult to establish natural hierarchies. We have this idea, this flatland idea that Ken Wilber talks about, where everybody is considered absolutely equal, and that sort of means that, everybody is the same as a thinker, as a writer, as a whatever, as a producer, but actually people have very different skill sets. So it's not a question of everybody as an individual is completely of equal value and merit, but we have to find a way to acknowledge that there are people who, maybe due to karmic past and the work that they've done and the sort of suffering that they intentionally put themselves in line to experience have deeper capacities in certain areas. So how do you because at the moment the left has all these different organizations and sort of individual figures, but it's not able to mesh together the way the right wing is. The right wing has this simple kind of pyramidical authoritarian structure that just works. They can move in lockstep together. So how do people who are more progressive or on the left or in this kind of spiritual subculture, how do they mesh together so that we can really collaborate? Because it's like if we're not smart enough to stop the juggernaut of this right-wing authoritarian, disaster, then, we can't pretend that we're any better than they are. We're actually stupider than they are. They somehow figured it out. So we have to get really sophisticated about how we use the media and how we message and, and so on, and but also not be reductive. So it's just a lot of stuff like that. It's more sort of strategic. Like I feel like the book, I put together this kind of foundation of really powerful ideas and concepts. So then it's like, how do I help shepherd them into the culture on different levels and help this transformative process that has to take place?
That's really interesting because I'm thinking about how you're talking about this nascent emergence of the global mind and how it seems like that's happening on one level really in a spontaneous way, and we're all kind of free-floating human particles and molecules in that. But, it's a question of also, can you just leave it to the spontaneous emergence of that mind, or how much of that needs to be structured and needs our kind of cooperative functionality to be a part of making that happen?
Exactly.
So spontaneity versus how much structure we would need to look at strategizing and.
Yeah. How much pressure? It's and it's a lot of times because it's what I talk about a lot in the book is kind of trying to integrate the kind of intuitive mindset with this more rational consciousness, and it's just a process. And if you push too hard from the rational side, even when then it sort of falls apart. So on the one hand, you have to recognize that it's emerging, that it's sort of self-organizing, and then just figure out how you support that process without impeding so whatever the natural kind of flow of it is.
You spoke just now about letting things be intuitive, and right before about love. I wonder if there's anything where love is based on trust in the old paradigm way. Is that related to ego, and there's a new way of love being? Is that being related? Is there something related to that?
Yeah. I mean, I would think that's I sort of vibe with what you're saying. Basically, I would say that in a way, human beings have not yet been serious enough for love, and that's coming. I mean, that's if you look at this apocalypse transition as a movement from the third chakra, which is the chakra of possessive consumption, desire, to the fourth chakra, which would be the opening of the heart chakra. That's just going to lead to something very, very different, I would think, and we can't even really fully ground that yet.
Is there any feminine aspect to that change?
Right. Well, I talk in the book about the Kali Yuga, which is the last of the Hindu four ages, and Kali representing the wrathful deity, the sort of wrathful manifestation of Shakti, who's the goddess of feminine sexual energy, the energy that's in manifestation, and really understanding that this Kali energy is moving through the culture in all these ways, and that has to be transformed back into Shakti, more positive Shakti energy, and that's a really complicated process. So this whole idea of the return of the goddess, I would say, is part of what's going on, but it's a lot of concepts in the New Age have been sort of taken to a certain level, like the kind of neo-tribal culture at Burning Man, but it's that next step when you're actually really, really embodying something. We still haven't really, I don't think most people have really gotten there as individuals, or certainly culturally.
Is it similar to a pendulum shift? We have to destroy before we create?
Yeah, I think that consciousness definitely has a kind of pendulum shift energy where we've gone all the way to one way of being and worldview so that we can come back with more oomph.
So every act of destruction is an act of creation?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's this whole non-dualistic idea again, and that it just takes a really long time to hold that in your mind. It's like the term enlightenment, which mostly doesn't really, the way people use it doesn't really mean very much. I mean, there's a story about Chogyam Trungpa, the Buddhist Lama. He was talking to his students once. And he said, you could all probably be enlightened right now, but I don't think you'd like it very much. You would find it too cold and too spacious. So we have this tendency to take these terms, like the term spirituality itself has become actually a huge problem, because people think that they're being spiritual if they're like eating a lot of raw food and going to yoga classes and listening to certain music, and it's all good in a sense, but is it anything better than like a new kind of consumer lifestyle or a new form of spiritual materialism? Like, what is that deeper level of commitment to transformation where you actually put yourself in the line and even just have this willingness to do whatever needs to get done to help the transformational process, rather than just looking groovy at trance parties or whatever. But we just have to. There's the idea of like fierce compassion rather than compassion being something like soft. Compassion can have a sharp edge to it. That may be the only way to make transformation. And there's just been a way with the New Age. There's been a kind of embracing of sort of concepts that make people feel comfortable and better about themselves, but actually don't really do much or much help. So I think we have to just go deeper in the way we're thinking about these concepts. So it's just that in our kind of we've inherited from Christianity this kind of simplistic, dualistic conditioning, and we need to interrogate that at a much deeper level if we really want to understand what's going on. And that's where also would be part of the paying more attention to our own motivation and our own use of energy and so on. Yeah.
What things have you learned in the process of writing these two books?
I've learned that God is a greater artist and has a better sense of humor than I'd expected. And I also have learned that basically, if I look at my own life, I would say that I feel like I'm at this point in a narrative or in a story or a kind of fable. Like I had this whole experience with this prophetic transmission of this Quetzalcoatl material, and that kind of reframed my life up to that point in a certain respect. So yeah, I basically think that we're in a kind of dream world illusion, and but sitting with that over the course of a few years now, it's like it becomes more and more kind of tangible and lucid and real. So that's a major transformation. And before I just thought, like most people who are in the secular materialist worldview, that events were accidental, that we were like sort of ping pong balls colliding through time and space coincidentally. And now it just seems like it's a whole different relationship to being.
Have you seen any manifestation of whatever you dream actually does manifest in the real world?
I've experienced all sorts of psychic phenomena and manifestations on many levels. To the point where I don't even get involved with it anymore.
Not even impressed.
I wonder if that kind of drifting from randomness to synchronicities is also the alignment of your intention with the greater intention.
Yeah, I would say for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Like the migrating towards that force or that intention that holds things more in an organized, intentional way, so it all unfolds that way. Yeah, exactly. The more you align yourself with the center of whatever that higher intention is, the more you move from randomness to synchronicity. Yeah, it's beautiful. Because a lot of people are like, well, I don't experience any of that, And right. It's like, well, how are you living? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What are you thinking about all the time? Yeah.